Adoption of the agenda. You've all had a chance to look at that agenda. If there are no questions or comments on the agenda, if I could have someone move that agenda be accepted as presented. Jim and Alan seconded.
Okay.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Thank you. Minutes of March 23rd. If you've all had a chance to review those, do you have any comments or questions on those? If not, could I have someone move that those minutes be adopted as presented? Harvey, thank you. Seconded. Okay, Brad, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All right, thank you very much. Allowed. Well, sir, I appreciate that. Business arising from the previous meeting, strategic plan update. I'm going to hand that over to Hollis so that I can have it by mine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was just because it was on our business last time and we had a motion to accept a proposal from Gemtech to be our lead on our strategic plan. I just wanted to update on that they I've met with our lead and we've set up several upcoming meetings and strategic planning sessions and some stakeholder stuff, and that's coming mostly from the other members of staff as well, and we'll be hearing more about it later on. But thinking about that May is going to be a very interesting time for that, and we are on track to hit the July 1st date of having a plan together with the government looking for. So the intention is that at the June board meeting, we will be presenting to the board what the strategic plan looks like. And there should be no surprises because you're all going to be involved for the next couple of months with it. So that's what that is, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, Hollis. Any questions, comments on that for Hollis? Before we move to the next item? No? Dangerous and unsightly procedures update. Thinking that's going to be you, Hollis.
Yep. So we had a discussion about dangerous and unsightly and the procedure. Doing it as a one-off, or not a one-off, but a kind of a pay-as-you-go plan. And so we were able to do that. We also had a discussion about whether or not a rural community had a legal right to provide their own service as a dangerous and unsightly, as opposed to the minister providing it. And it turned out they do. And I did check with our lawyer on that as well, but it's pretty clear in legislation. There's nothing really ambiguous about that. So so we're able to do that going forward. And as such, we have a new client for it, Mr. Charles, which actually we're about to sign on. So that should be a benefit to them. And number one, getting the work done, and number two, saving some money. So.
Any other questions for Hollis?
I'd like to speak on that, if you don't mind.
No, absolutely.
I'm going to say that council was unanimous on that decision. It's a for us. The province and budget hasn't been doing the job. They're paying them, but they haven't been doing the job. So this is going to be even better. We don't have to front load the money to the province, and we're going to get the job done. So we're quite excited about getting it.
Good job. Al? No, I agree. Did we kind of look at the lay of the land and see what we're getting into? Like if we did turn the key on this, what is there a lot of stuff that we could get bombarded?
There's a lot that municipalities could do, and it's going to be a conversation that we're going to have at some point, because it's not a flat rate and we demolish all buildings. It's per building, and there's a procedure for each one, and there's a certain amount of time it takes for each one, but the cost is assessed at like an hourly rate for our services per building. So my suggestion going forward, especially as you get into budgeting for 2024, is to set aside a certain amount you want to accomplish. We tackle that. So say it's we want to accomplish, we want to take care of 3 or 4 properties this year and 3 or 4 properties next year. But we're gonna need to have that kind of a discussion, because if we really want to go at it, spend the money to do it, then we're gonna have to talk about it. Our staffing, it's a great accomplishment. It's not a simple process, it's a lengthy process, there's a lot involved. And so we need to talk about resources needed on both sides to be able to do that, to work through methodically the problems that we need to work through. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a conversation here.
Yeah, no,
So just to continue on, I guess I was leaning towards the fact that the towns were already kind of doing this already. I'm talking about the rural acceptance of it. Like, is there a lot that's already on the, like, what the lay of the land is, and we're just gonna all of a sudden turn this on and there's gonna be a lot of upset? Like, how are we gonna get ourselves into that? If there is, maybe it's all not bad anyway. I don't know. Well, no, we know what we're getting into.
I can speak to that. First of all, with the service commission doing it, it takes away from a local person doing it. So some of these areas are, and I'll speak on our side, of it, some of the areas are dangerous. Some are drug houses, and they're going to need people. It's going to be nice to have people coming in from both sides and doing this job, because the local people would be safe for them to take on that stuff. And say we take on, like I say, one at a time, and we budget it properly and get the job done. So I guess
there are a number of different ways that a community can accomplish that goal. In McAdam, we've used about 4 different methods, and they vary from the simple one is going to the homeowner and saying, your home is dilapidated. What are you going to do about it? And then they'll say, well, maybe I'm not going to do anything about it. And then I sit down with them and I say, well, this is how it's going to happen. I explain the whole process to them. Sometimes they will turn around and sell you the property for $1 because they don't want to deal with it anymore. That has its own problems as soon as you take ownership of the property. The other method is that you have a building inspector come along that works for the community, and they determine that it is a derelict building. A whole different process, but much cleaner from the community perspective, because you're going to pay the cost up front. So, for example, when we tear down a house in McAdam, we have the legal fees, we have the cost of actually doing the demolition, the cleanup of the property, those kinds of things that are taken into account. So you pay that up front. But if before the end of December in that current year, you put an application into the province for funding to replace the money that you spent, that generally comes back by the end of January into early February. I don't think it's been any later than February that we've gotten that money back. So, for example, we tore down an old theater in McAdam. There was asbestos, there was a whole bunch of costs. Actually ran into about $70,000. So we paid that up front. We then went to the province and they refunded that money to us. So it's when you do it through the building inspector through RSC 10, it's really the process that you're wading through. You're paying the fees up front and then you're claiming it at the back end when it's all said and done. So there's about, like I say, we've used about 4 different techniques on how to tear down properties. But this seems to be the easiest one by far, because we're not really talking directly with the homeowners. So anyway, from McAdam's perspective, we had 25 houses 6 years ago. We've torn down 23 of them. We only had 2 left. So in 6 years, we've gone down 23 homes. So for us, it's been a success story. As soon as you tear these houses down, the houses beside them pop up in value. People start fixing their properties up around there. It's a win-win for the whole community as soon as you start accomplishing it. So from my experience, I just say it's a win-win for everybody and highly recommend it. So glad to see you come on board, John.
Just one other thing, in our incorporated areas like Blackstone or St. George, there's no real issues. They've been used to the bylaw for years. It's the outside areas, the former LSDs. They've had nobody actually going in and checking on these places. I've got people calling me, or I spoke at a seniors dinner, the night, I had ladies coming up to me thanking me for asking, moving ahead with this, because in their areas, there's a lot of places out there that unincorporated areas that are dangerous or is bad, and they want the same thing, they want to get it cleaned up so that their property values will come up. So politically speaking, it's a good move.
Yes.
Or is everyone right now through the RSC, all with the RSC, like everybody?
No, not all, not all.
Okay.
If your community is interested, talk to Hollis about how you do that. And certainly more than happy to.
What's the advantage, disadvantage, like cost savings? You said there was, what's the difference in the cost between what we got now and what we get with the RSC?
Well, right now, we're funding choice in rural community. It'd be the province that has that responsibility, and so you're paying them, I don't know what your bill is for province for that.
We pay $140,000 a year for that service, and we don't get anything for it. So now we don't have to send $140,000 to the province. We keep that money and we do it case by case, and then we get something done. Right. So we won't pay anything while we're doing it.
Yes, you didn't know that when we last talked about it, so that's, you found that out since we last talked about this topic, yeah?
Yes,
Yeah, okay, good.
$140,000 is a lot of cases.
$140,000 a lot of money.
A lot of cases.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's important to recognize that every time we deal with these properties. There's resources required, well, from us, that you pay us for, but there's also resources required on the municipality to carry through, like even just the demolition and the disposal stuff. It's all cost recovery. So all the costs associated with doing any of these projects is recoverable from the problem. So it doesn't actually end up costing you anything. We decided to cram it in as well, to be the same. Just get the same service over there as well.
So you do the costs and then submit to government and get it reimbursed and you're back.
They basically put a lien on the property and they were going to sell it or do anything, and they had to pay that off like a tax bill, and then the province gets their money back.
So if we didn't have that bylaw, you paying into the province? Like we don't have that bylaw, are we still paying in the province for that?
Not through I don't imagine through the municipality, I have to have a specific locality.
I haven't either, I just.
It's entirely possible that you are, Harvey, in a rural community. I
I
don't know.
suspect you are then.
That's what I was wondering, if something I have to look into, I guess.
I have no way to get it passed.
We've got one or two councillors that's not on board yet, but we've almost that close to passing.
Especially if on the island, I don't know Kent that well, but if you have an issue with dangerous and unsightly, it's a good way to go.
Well, we had an awful record with that fish play. I got it cleaned up with the environment, but when I got him down there, he seen 2 or 3 houses, he contacted those people as well, but it was hard to get done with this. I think it's a good tool, but.
Yeah. The way I like this, or the reason I like this way is all the legalities are covered. And it's chunk, and legally the judge is then saying you have the right, and it always comes back to council to make the final decision on the tear down. So you can defer if you wish, if you have contact with the owner. So it's very flexible as you're going through it. But once you get to that final point, the final decision does come to council. Council makes that final decision to go and do the tear down, and then they put it out for tender.
Yeah. So I will say is when you come to council, council should not be involved. Pre that.
No,
You don't pick and choose the houses, let the foot do it and stay out of it, because you are the one that makes the last decision. That was legal advice that we were given. You just can't have someone call you up and say, I don't like this home. You stay out, say you call, and they send the person to do it or whatever. Stay out of that till the end.
Yeah, these are very sensitive files sometimes, and we have to, and we're very sensitive with the people who are involved, because sometimes it's situations that are just really unfortunate. So we have to be very, cognizant of what we're doing here. And sometimes you're tearing down somebody's home. Sometimes they're not naked.
Exactly.
Okay, any last comments, questions? Anything under business arising from previous minutes that we didn't cover or somebody would like to bring up? Yeah. New business, I don't have anything under new business.
Their opportunity to maybe talk about kind of the RCMP meeting and maybe
Absolutely.
some follow-up, but I guess where I'm going with that is, you know, we've often heard over the last, well, especially the last year, public confidence in the RCMP. You could argue is at an all-time low, but I'm also hearing municipal leaders sharing that same frustration. And, you know, we can set our priorities and then follow up with them. I know they put in their quarterly reports that we get emailed to us now, but I was wondering if there's a way that as an RSC, we could take action. I think these additional resources for our CMP officers, especially with over 50 of them going to rural areas, I think a letter signed by all of us saying that we need them in our region. Whether it works or not, it's something we should do for due diligence to show that we have a real challenge here. And I'll be straight up, I don't really care if they're in St. Andrews or they're in St. Stephen or they're in Campbell, because we're all dependent on each other. This crime's moving around, and you know, I said it before, St. Stephen probably really didn't see it coming. But in St. Andrews, even though I don't think we have a crime problem right now, I see it coming. And, you know, it's just down the road. It's coming our way. It drives around the community. So I did draft up a draft and give it to you, Mr. Chair, but I think signing a letter to Chris Austin saying, you know, again, you can look at, but it's basically saying you can look at geography, you can look at call volume, and you can look at existing resources, but there's a great number of residents that aren't even calling anymore because they don't think anything's being done. And we have cases both in the courts, but also unreported of vigilante justice that we need to stop. So I think maybe having a stronger voice to the minister and as well Deanna Hill, the commanding officer of the RCMP from this region, at least put us on the map to say, give us a little bit extra attention when you're allocating these resources out. And then secondly, where I was thinking, and I don't know if it's even possible, but I don't know if the RSC themselves would be ever interested for us to do a pilot project where perhaps there is a funding opportunity, maybe it's in 2024. I don't even know if the resources can be used for this, but to allocate out resources for cameras for each of our communities, whether it be 15,000, 20,000 per community, however you divide it up. So that way we can really give something to the public to say things are changing, because right now we need to give some type of signal to our communities that we are going to do something to make them safer. And that's not going to solve it overnight. And I think the superintendent said it best, we're not going to wrest our way out of this, but the more visibility we have, the more people will feel our community safe. So I just think we should, as an RSC, have a response to the way people are thinking and the way that we're all thinking.
Yeah, I certainly don't mind looking at doing the letter, Brad. We can, if you've got a draft, submit that to us and we'll prepare that. I think we should probably send that draft out to all the members, board members, before we send it off, get their approval for it. As far as putting cameras up, McAdam has done that. We put up, it was a little over $40,000 to put up cameras in our downtown core. How that worked for us, it worked out very well. Just on one individual alone, we put about $10,000 worth of fines on him for the things that he was doing on Front Street. If there is a crime occurs in your community, if they're strategically located, you will see those individuals driving through your community at that given hour, and that gives you a pretty good point to start any investigations with. Make sure that they're high quality cameras, because the RCMP need to be able to see faces, they need to be able to see license plate numbers, details on vehicles, those kinds of things when they come to do the investigation. But it does work very well. So I highly recommend, based on my experience with cameras, that they work very well. Whether I'm not sure how we pay for that through RFC camera. We've tried to do other things like that in the past, and it's usually has not worked out because all the communities have to be involved. But I'll leave that to Hollis.
I'll just make one comment, though. Public safety is one of the mandates now, just from the things that changed since.
Probably the last time we looked at this stuff.
Yeah, but it still might not be possible, but I'm just saying.
Just so we're clear, RC is not responsible for public safety, we're responsible for public safety committee. So,
Oh, okay, there you go, thanks.
So. I'm sorry, but it's a good avenue, a good forum to exchange ideas and thoughts on how we combat crime. I spent 45 minutes with a reporter out of Ontario this morning, talking about crime and how we're trying to deal with it here and how they're trying to deal with it there. This is not a localized phenomenon. This is right across the country. We're dealing with it now. Other communities are further down the road, as we heard from our RCMP friends, that if you take a look at Vancouver, you'll see that what they're doing in Vancouver and how drugs are overtaking that community. You will see the same things happening in this direction. Montreal, as a matter of fact, just about a week ago, I heard that they were trying to bring it up with their council to legalize harder drugs in their community because they just can't police it anymore. So there are issues associated with this. But going back to Brad's point, cameras are a viable tool to assist you in getting the culprits off the street.
So yeah, Brad's point on the letter, I fully agree and support that from the RSC of doing that. I think it's a great idea to have a firm letter in place after that meeting. And I said at that meeting, I mean, the RCMP is there to sell, to give us what they're doing, but they're also selling and providing us with that service. So they listed a bunch of, like the cameras, a bunch of tools in the toolbox, which are all great tools, but nothing will beat having boots on the ground. And especially, and I can only say like for an area like Fundy Shores, where we don't have at this point a downtown core or anything. If you follow our social media posts, different people, we're getting to that point where stuff is on the rise, and people are going to social media posting stuff. Even this past week or so, we had a trailer that was taken and spotted in our area, and anyway, social media posts had to be taken down because names, stuff were, and again, it's small, like all of you guys, it's small town in Brunswick, and everybody knows everybody, and I'm scared of getting into that whole vigilante type thing too. And I can tell you in my other job, the RCMP that were at that meeting, there was a lot of white shirts, not a lot of brown shirts, boots on the ground. And I can tell you firsthand experience that there's very, very limited resources in Charlotte County as far as I leave, not only police, ambulance, you name it. The resources are very thin, and you definitely need the boots on the ground. You have an RCMP officer responding from St. George to St. Stephen, and there's only a couple on all night. That's. I know they won't say about operations because, you know, it's hard to dictate what they are. But I think the boots on the ground, the firm letter saying those 50 officers, I don't know how many we would get, like Brad said. But I think we need to put up a big fight for this area, because whether St. Stephen or St. Andrews or Eastern Charlotte gets them, I think it's going to help the whole region, because they're going to be spread everywhere. So the letter, I mean, the cameras not, I think is great, but for us at Fundy Shores, we don't have a downtown core, or we don't have, you know, we utilize it, but I think the letter could put, that's what we need. We need boots on the ground.
So, yeah,
Just want to throw this out there, just so, even though the cameras aren't boots on the ground, they will assist. I just want to put this frame of mind in everyone's head, and you can agree or disagree. They increase the efficiency of the boots on the ground. And so if they're not busy doing that, that camera can speed up the process and give them more time on the ground. So just kind of look at the cameras as being a good tool. But yeah,
And I
Yeah,
fully agree
yeah,
that the cameras or anything else that we can provide as a tool, I think it's great and will assist, but I think the more that we see patrols
Oh,
and
yeah.
clearing people, because I think crime is more deterred when they actually see, I know in our area, a cop and police officer went by the other day and the whole thing at the store was, they're not here, they're here to look for something, they're not here to help. It's hard on the RCMP because they're getting that in the community now that people are kind of seeing them as they're only there when something drastic or bad happens.
Reactive.
Yeah, instead of proactive, so, yeah, the more tools, the better, but I certainly would advocate strongly to get as many officers here as we can within our SC can.
Yes, I just want to add one more part, to the letters side of things. What they told us though was they're going to be dispersed based on data and calls, right?
Yeah.
So one thing I thought about later was, can they take like a part of that 80 officers as a group and do, I don't know what I call sting operations, but literally move around the province, and they're here for like a certain amount of time, and they go on.
Mobile unit.
Yeah, like something like that. So it's not based on data. It's like, they're here, let's clean up some stuff and move on to the next time, move on to the next time, and move them. I don't know, maybe that letter could state something like that. But it is based on calls, and the issue we just talked about there, not everyone's calling. No, yeah.
They actually do that in one squad, and the XMP does it, moves around
Yeah.
the province.
Mhm.
If that's more like a traffic.
Yeah.
It's a difficult one. If you look at the contract, the contract is a provincial contract for the majority of us. It's a municipal contract for St. Andrews. The municipal contract is about twice as much money as the provincial. The provincial, and I'm not sure I'm using the right term, but it's the general one that most people are under. It's an on-call service. So if you don't call, you don't get service. Whereas if it's in the municipality, the RCMP are supposed to spend time in that municipality. Although we understand that the folks that are actually supposed to be working in St. Andrews are being shared amongst the rest of the region. The other aspect of that is if you have municipal policing, you are not covered for the extras. So if you have a homicide in your community, if you have community policing, those special police officers that come in to deal with that, the municipality has to pay separately for those services. If you have somebody that's lost, a child was lost, they have to bring a dog in. Well, the municipality pays to have that dog unit come in and go searching for that child. If you're on the on-call or the provincial, that's all included. So if you do have an issue, they will come in and do the homicide. They will come in and do the search with the dog at no extra cost to your municipality. And that's what happened in McAdam, was we used to have municipal service. And we had a major crime take place in the community. And the RCMP came in with their special unit. It cost us about $150,000. And when you have a budget of 1.4 million, 150,000 when you're already paying 300,000 or 400,000 for policing is a chunk of money. So they had to fall away from that municipal service and go back to the on-call service because you just couldn't afford to pay the taxes to pay for it. So there are those aspects to this as well. But really, the big point you're making is valid. You have to have boots on the ground. They have to be visible. And whatever we can do to help while they're visible, to help solve crime is important for us all. It's a team effort.
So like we're discussing, our policing right now is always, it's basically on calls, it's reactive policing. And then we're not getting a proactive part at all. It's just, there's no one available to do it. And that's just chasing and chasing. So I got another question too. I want to, based on policing, because there's a lot of municipalities talking about policing, which is a pretty hot topic. Is our cost going to go up as people start dropping off? Let's say the ones that stay with RCMP. Anyone ever looked into that?
I have
Because if you just like Hollis and you're providing the service, not to stay with it, the service is here, but if people didn't go with it, it's here. Like, exactly the same thing that happened with the province, you're gonna have to start charging whoever's left more money.
Probably.
Yeah, well, I think that's happening too.
In theory, with the specialized units, yes, they'd have to, it's economies of scale, right, so.
So that's something that could be interesting in the future.
We did, there was a community up north, the northeastern part of the province. They did a study a few years back. You would call that. Oh, Hollis, I don't think. you were here.
Region.
Oh,
Jim, you might remember.
sure.
Sure. They did a study up there on policing, had an idea of what it was gonna cost them and the services that they could expect for that cost. I don't know whether they actually went that way.
No, it looked like the study, initially it looked like they were gonna save $1.5 million, $2 million a year for everybody in the region, but theirs is a little bit different because they had 3 police forces already. They had EMPP, and they had Bathurst, and they had RTP. So they're looking at combining those into a single police force, and they'd be taking on. But there were other problems that happened after that with the formation of it, and then a bunch of other things happened up there, like COVID and stuff. It kind of fell away, but it's certainly something I think we're still probably going to look at. But they just delayed it a little bit. But yeah, it did look like it was going to save them money. I'd be skeptical of that personally, but
One of the other things that we did look at as well, this was probably about 3 years ago now, was combining with Fredericton or St. John. I know there were some discussions on that, and that went flat. So there are a number of different options that can be relooked at, but at this point, I think, how does it work when we looked at it, it was you can't back out of a contract for at least 2 years. So you have to pay for 2 years after you notify the RCMP that you're backing out of the contract. So for that 2-year period, you're going to be double paying for your security. So that's something to take into consideration as well.
the other thing to consider is, I think you can give them a 2-year notice and just have them for 2 more years as you ramp up your own. But the other thing to take into consideration, that there's federal subsidy in those areas as well. So.
Right, that was much, yes, sorry.
Those are subsidized, right to get right now.
So it's pretty complex. There would have to be some expertise applied to it to try and determine what might be a better solution. But I think a good start is to get that letter sent out as quick as possible. And we'll see how many of those RCMP officers or if Al thought on that might be a player. We can add that in there potentially as well.
Well, for the draft tonight, when Tampa's meeting Toronto.
Thanks, Brett. I'm hoping that.
Somehow they need to be held accountable though, when they don't provide the service or money you give. That's what we gotta figure out.
Yeah, when I went through the contract, I went through it with a pretty good comb. The documents about that thick. There's a lot in there that what I would have called in the military is boilerplate. It's who's doing what to whom, who's paying for what, who's responsible for what. But when it comes right down to what are the objectives that you are holding the RCMP to, what criteria? It's about half a page. Out of that entire document, it's a half page, which I was flummoxed when I saw that, because I just thought, how can you run a police force and hold them accountable when all you're doing is a half page worth of accountability? It really said very, very little. So that in any future negotiations between a province and the federal government with regard to policing, that has to change. There has to be criteria in there and, anyway, goals that have to be met. Because
You mean
that's not-
KPIs?
It's not there now. What's that?
You mean KPIs?
That's right. KPIs.
That's pretty simple.
Yeah.
We left that meeting Thursday, Sunday night, our pharmacy got stole. Some was there, thought it got broken into, and the woman had to call me and get me to call for them to actually come down. They said, well, if you can see who it is on the camera, we'll come down. If not, there's nothing we can do, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I texted Scott Kennedy there and said, at least send somebody down, make them their own fingerprints or something like. And they did send somebody down after a bit. I mean, that was, you know, drugs that so right? And that blows my mind for the price that they get for a little place like us. You know, that's crazy.
I know. And that's just another symptom of the frustration. So we all live with it. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. It was a good conversation around the table. Appreciate it. We get that better sent off.
I think it's for a lot, but
Yeah.
but you mentioned something about recouping some funds with your camera system. Did you get the $10,000?
No, we didn't get any money back on
Okay, that's why I was
that.
asking how you got the fine money, but you didn't.
Oh, no, the fine money, yeah. It used to be that if there were fines levied within your municipality,
Yeah.
the money actually came back to you in the municipality, but now that changed a few years back. Any money is now taken through fines and go back to the province.
That's what I figured, but when you said something about the $10,000, why are you doing that on camera? Because that could recoup it, but anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that was just money that we were
Okay.
levied. Okay. With that, I guess we'll turn to the committee and staff reports. We'll start with the CEO report. That'll be nice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're gonna keep this brief. So we'll wrap this one up. Anyway, I wrote a brief report on purpose. You can see where we are. Nothing out of the ordinary. Building permits are really slammed this time of year. Just as much as any other year, maybe more so. Nothing was staying in there. I did go to a legal seminar, Cox and Palmer put it on, I organized together and CEOs came, a lot of valuable information, a lot of the HR issues and the different things for this. So it was specific to regional service commissions and design reports for us. And we had a good discussion on the board. And something that wasn't completely clear to me, but would be completely clear up at that session is when you are elected to council as a mayor or as a councillor, you're limited in liability for the decisions you make on council. That is not the case here. As a director of this corporation, the responsibility is to this corporation, and those municipal protections don't exist here. So it's just something that just to be aware of. I think we all probably were aware of it at one point. We do carry errors and omissions insurance, but that only matters if it's an honest error or you honestly forgot about something. That's fine. If something is done maliciously, which I don't anticipate is going to happen with this group at all, but if something is done outside the lines and you do it, you actually are personally liable as a director of this corporation, where that's not necessarily the case on municipal council. So that was the piece of information that was the big ticket. As I said, we've got some meetings initiated Gentech for our strategic planning. That is underway. It's going to be extremely busy in May for our staff and for many views we can get more. We have a new executive assistant in place to my right, Megan. Megan's already proved herself to be a big asset this week. She just started. So we're happy to have her. And the one thing I didn't write down here in the report, but I do want to make the board aware of is we had a fairly major fire at the landfill. Major enough that all the staff were called back and all of the staff showed up and they stayed all night. And there was how many fire departments? Four fire departments.
Wellington, West Station, Western Charlotte, Morris.
Yeah, okay, so they all showed up. It was pretty significant. Everybody got it under control. no damage to the liner, no damage to any equipment, and most importantly, nobody got hurt. But I wanted to publicly thank our staff, the dedication they showed. They all came back and to stay there in the middle of the night, middle of nowhere, fighting that out of control fire on a landfill can be, you know, it's a very daunting thing. But they all did, they felt the responsibility to take care of it. So publicly, I want to thank.
And Hollis was on vacation and said, don't call me in some major hazard, but unless this place is on fire. Fortunately, I was like, hey, that's what we talked about.
Now we know who to blame, right? Thomas's fault.
That's actually what he said, unless this place is on fire. Okay.
So,
Sure.
I just want to make a compliment too, is, with this amalgamation and with the firefighter stuff that we went through, a lot of comments come out saying, why wasn't St. Stephen at that fire? So what I want to say here publicly is St. Stephen was covering those other people that were out. So they do, everyone had their part to play.
That's right.
So,
Oh,
so,
yes,
so anyway, that's just some of the stuff they could say because they were jumping on the vibe there, but you know, all the firefighters had a part to play in that fire.
We should
That's how it always works.
all the fire departments we've got in our region.
Yeah.
They do some astonishing work. I'm glad so that we have, you know, people that are dedicated to that. That's my report, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. The monthly, are we gonna, the audited draft 2022 financial statements, that's gonna be on
That's
the
gonna
next
be an
page?
AGM.
So Dylan Sibbert is here by Zoom to present that, but I have it on the schedule for the AGM.
Yeah.
Up to you if you want to do it right now or.
Would anyone mind if, because they've been kind of waiting, the auditors to give us their report, would anybody mind if we kind of shift gears here a little bit? We have the auditor come in and give us their report. Okay, we can do that.
Perfect. You want me to take over then right now? Can everybody hear me okay? Perfect. Well, good evening. Maybe I'll first, before I get into things, I'll do an introduction because I know that there's been a bit of a change in the board of directors, and you know, some of the faces I obviously recall or remember seeing, but there's obviously a lot of new faces. So my name is Dylan Fitzherbert. I've been working with Teat Saunders Doyle now for a number of years, and I've been involved in the audit process for Southwest for as many years as, you know, it's been back in our back under our roof. So I think that started back in 2017. So I've been involved in the audit in some capacity in each and every year, including the last year as well. So what I want to do is just kind of briefly go over our audit process and the results of our audit for the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2022. So at this point, we are substantially complete. There's essentially two housekeeping items that we need in order to finally put our stamp or our signature on the financial statements. And that would be, of course, the approval of the draft financial statements and then the receipt of a signed management rep letter, which we always get Hollis to send right at, you know, the last part of the audit. So as part of our audit and, you know, in the completion phase, there's certain required communication that we have to make to what's called those charging governance, which is of course the board of directors. In past years, it's been the finance committee and their kind of mandate, but this year will be obviously to the new board. So as I mentioned, we are substantially completed the audit. And the audit itself, of course, is all in accordance with public sector accounting standards. And then we are governed by the general auditing standards of Canada. So those are kind of the two frameworks that this audit and this organization in particular are relative to. And of course, all this notes here you won't see in the financial statements or in the audit report. These are just general comments on the onset. So the audit itself, we're not expressing any opinion on the internal control environment of the organization itself. We are just expressing an opinion on the financial statements and those figures that we're looking at. But in order to get to the point where we can do that, we have to gain an understanding of the internal control environment. And in doing so, if we find any areas of material weakness, areas where we think a process could be improved, or there's controls that are maybe suited to be in that place, then we're required to communicate that. So what we've done is prepared what's called a management letter. We'll provide that to Hollis and his team to mull over. One of them in particular is, an emphasis that we had on our audit planning meeting is to really look at the revenue process. So we have looked at that, and we've just kind of offered up some areas that we think might be beneficial to the organization. At the end of the day, the things that we say in that letter is not indicative of us changing the report if something doesn't get changed. It's just more of, here's some suggestions. If you want to put them in, that's great. If not, it's not going to change anything as far as the audit conclusion go or anything like that. Because there is always that kind of conversation that you have to have is, the cost or the time or the maybe potentially inefficiency of adding such controls worth, mitigating whatever risk it's set up to do. So that's always something that the management and or the board will take into consideration and review. But we will provide that letter as far as our final package to Hollis and the rest of the staff. We're also required, if we come across any fraud or illegal acts or any legal or regulatory issues, to bring those to those charged with governance. We're noting there's no such items, no such areas of even indications that we would say is something significant to bring up. So again, that is obviously very good news. Summary of misstatements. There's nothing at the end of the year that we have not corrected. If we did find an error, which I will report we haven't, then those would be corrected, but nothing unadjusted at the end of the year. Another key point that we always like to bring up, because it is substantial and especially substantial next year for the organization, is any changes to accounting standards. There is one significant change, and Mark, obviously being a public sector guru himself, is well aware. There's going to be a change with regards to how and where the asset retirement obligation or the post-closure liability falls under the public sector accounting standards. So this change will be coming to effect and will impact next year's financial statements. The extent to the impact, we haven't went through and into details to delve in to see if it will materially change that number. But just bringing that to everyone's attention that there is a significant change coming to the accounting standards that would impact the organization. So that will be on the docket for next year. As part of our communication, we always bring up anything that would be what we consider significant, sensitive transactions. The only one that we always bring up, and we have brought it in years past, is of course the post-closure liability. That is a big number, which at the end of the day is really an estimate. So there's various assumptions and estimates made to come into that figure, to determine that figure. So we always bring that up because that really there is some subjectivity to it. We always do a pretty in-depth analysis over the working papers that Mark and the team prepare, and the various assumptions that go into calculating that balance. Nothing that's come to our attention that we would question any of those or we'd see as any of them being inaccurate or assumptions being offside. So again, just to note that obviously is a large estimate there, and you will see that pop up in a couple spots in the financial statements. The liability itself, as well as the amount that's been expensed each year as the capacity of the landfill is used year over year. And then kind of as an overall comment before I get into the independent auditors report is that I just want to say and mostly say thank you to the staff of Southwest that this audit went relatively smooth again this year. We've had some large changes on our side with regards to a new standard coming into place that took a little bit more time from staff. So obviously thank you to Claudette, Hollis, and Mark, and the rest of the staff that helped out throughout the audit for making that go as smooth as always. And not causing any delays or anything like that. It obviously went as planned. So thank you to everyone involved. So with that, what I'll do is I'll just flip on to our independent auditors report. So that is on page 1 of the financial statements. And then once I get through this, I'll turn it over to Mark to kind of go through and give a brief overview of the statements as he's done in years past. So the main paragraph people obviously are concerned about would be the first paragraph that's labeled opinion. And within that, there's a second little paragraph there. So what that states is, in our opinion, the accompanying financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the organization as of December 31st, 2022, and the results of operations and its cash flows for the year then ended. And that's in accordance with the Canadian Public Sector Accounting Standards. So what that all is to say is that it's a clean audit report. There's nothing to come to our attention that we'd say that, you know, would be materially misstated within these financial statements. So another clean audit report. The rest of the paragraphs you'll see, the basis of opinion, the responsibilities of management and those charged with governance, as well as the responsibilities of the auditors, are those standard paragraphs that are required in any audit reports. Nothing has changed in there. Nothing you know, scary within any of those words or any additional paragraphs added. So in all, like I said, it's obviously a clean audit report. And nothing else to bring to your attention as far as the audit goes or the process goes. So again, as far as, you know, an auditor side it goes, a very successful year from that. So what I'll do now is I'll pass the mic back over to Mark Porter, and he can kind of run through the highlights of the financial statements for everyone in the room.
Thank you, Dylan. You want me to talk about them now or wait till the AGM?
Do you want to let Dylan go?
Yes.
We can do it at the end.
Okay.
Yeah. So Dylan, thank you very much. I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna let Mark. This isn't actually the AGM, it's the regular part of the meeting.
Yeah.
It's whatever. But we appreciate all of your comments. What we'll do is we'll let you off the hook.
Perfect.
We'll close out this meeting and we'll let Mark go through it at the AGM portion, if that's okay.
That's perfect for me.
All right.
Thanks,
All
Doug.
right. Enjoy the rest of your meeting, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move into the monthly financial report.
All right, so first page is the balance sheet. So as of the end of March, in the bank, we've got $1,315,000. We got $700,000 receivables plus interest and HST. We have reserve funds of $3.6 million. Closure funds are $1.7 million. And prepaid expenses of $139,000. So our current assets are basically $7.6 million. Our tangible capital assets are $11,200,000. Liabilities are $568,000, and our closure liability sits at $1,740,000. And the various equity accounts are detailed down below. The largest all being solid waste related.
We do talk about a current surplus deficit of 105,000.
Yeah, that's over here on another page. They're farther on. We get into the revenues and expenses. It's the last 5 or 6 pages of the state of the handout. Okay. So the summary one for total revenue and total expense, we end up with a deficit so far of 105,000 for the first 3 months of the year. Solid waste revenue, we would expect that there's a percentage total on the side. So normally we're a quarter of the way through, it'd be roughly 25% difference from the total budget.
Sorry, Mark, I've not found you on this paper yet.
Okay,
Which one? are you
It's,
saying?
it's, you went from the back of the handout.
Yeah.
It is the 6th page back in. It's a summary income statement at the top. It's total revenue and total expenses.
There we go, gotcha.
Yeah. Normally the balance sheet's just ahead of that. Okay. So the totals. Well, we have for the first 3 months, we have $1,987,000 from all of our services. And expenses are $2,092,000, so it gives us a deficit of $105,000. And there's a couple of things that throw that off proportionally because we bought the rock truck, so a large portion of the capital expenditures are already in the first 3 months rather than a proportionate share. So that's what's creating the deficit at this point.
I thought that might be the other one.
Yeah, because this was before any rate changes to the tipping fees. The next page is the corporate services, so these are our administrative costs. And we've got 173,000. So for the first 3 months, which is 30% of the full year budget. And some things come a lot earlier in the year than others, so my wages are loaded to the first part of the year, and we're doing T4s, year-end statements, all that stuff. And the audit bill will be in there, things like that. The allocation, down the bottom half of the page, shows how we allocate it to each of our services as required by legislation. Once again, solid waste sucks up the majority of it because it's the majority of the transactions. The next page is just the solid waste services, so that's the revenues and expenses. So the deficit for solid waste is 103,000. And the total was 105,000 for all the services, so that's having the largest effect on everything. So percentage wise, most of them are close to 25, except for the tipping fee from the other RSC. And that's because the waste is front end loaded to us. We get most of the revenue in the first 3 months. In the summer, it all goes north. And construction and demolition waste, we've had more of that come in lately for some reason. You see all the initiatives to tear down houses, I guess. Anyway, they're all roughly same in there. As far as the expenses go for solid waste, they're somewhere close to 25% for everything, so you get down to capital expenditures from operations, and we spent 566,000 so far out of the 1.2 million that was budgeted. Local planning is on the next page. And it has a surplus of $7,000 so far. I don't think there's anything wild and wonderful there, except that the proportionate share of the capital reserve transfer isn't in there yet. Cooperative and regional planning, not much going on there. There's a deficit of $236 the first 3 months. Our new services on the next page, it starts with regional tourism promotion. And we're 32,000 in the hole there so far, but that's because under other admin expenses, we paid for the study. So that should be it for that budget line, basically, for a while, or that one specific budget line. Regional economic development got 32,000 positive. And that's because the member fees and stuff have come in, but we haven't done the expenditures yet. Community development has a small loss, $1,825. Nothing really out of whack there. Next one is regional transportation. See, I got a page break going in there. Okay, so there's not much under that service line. There are some small differences, I guess, from the annual budget. The government transfers and the other admin services are under by the 50,000 that goes to dial a ride. So we haven't got a bill from them, and they won't get paid till we get a bill. Public safety, there's not much in that. Guess I should this one out for Jim. The 7,500 under regional emergency measures is there. That's the RSC share of the vehicle. Oh my, yeah. And the rest of it that we paid is sitting as a loan. Regional sport, rec and culture. And so far. Yeah, that's pretty well even. It does say in the deficit, there's a formula line problem on that one.
Yeah.
Anyway. Takes a little while to work the wrinkles out on all these new ones. So overall, it's not too bad.
FYI, audit cost went up. It's gonna go up maybe for next year.
Yeah, everything goes up. Any comments, questions for Mark? Monthly report, no? Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Is there anything else anybody wants to bring up? Jim?
Sorry, for you to, what's the status on our bylaws that were being rewritten for us? Haven't heard anything.
Good question, and no, I haven't heard any, I don't have any update on that,
There's no update on
but
that.
I will follow
What about, how far are we away from a delivery model for our economic development? Any idea?
up. Delivery model.
Yeah, we were supposed to have a delivery model developed. One point in time.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
in-house, we tried that last year, right?
But
We're,
I haven't seen anything fully in writing defining it. It's when it out was coming sometime.
the way we had left that last year, the province gave us options. They were trying to move us towards St. John or Fredericton, Synergy, and I can't remember what the one in
Ignite.
Ignite.
Okay.
We felt uncomfortable with that as a board.
Absolutely.
So we invited, I think it was, it's Synergy. Synergy.
Yeah.
From,
Yeah.
Eastern Charlotte
And
and we
Future
had
St.
Future St. Stephen come. They both presented briefings. I think it was pretty clear that neither one of those organizations was prepared at that point to take on a regional role. What I found was, most of their organizations are personality driven. And to try and mix and match those at that point in a mishmash, I didn't feel, the board didn't feel that that was gonna be viable. So we decided that we would go our own way for this coming year. So the delivery model at this point, the final delivery model has not been chosen to my knowledge. What we were trying to do is we were trying to determine our strengths and weaknesses this year. And then we would try to determine what that delivery model was. So what we were concerned about was we wanted to have the Economic Development Committee at an arm's length. We didn't want it to be part of the RSC. Certainly, we want representation from the RSC going into that committee and bringing back information and to the board. What the final decision is going to be on that, to my knowledge, has not been made yet. Now we are having a meeting. Unfortunately, I was ill. I didn't make it to the first Economic Development Committee meeting. I'll be at the second one, and it's happening.
May
Charlene,
23rd in person.
the 23rd.
Of May, yeah.
23rd of May.
You're welcome to come to the live.
Okay.
I can send you the invite.
So I think at this point, that decision has not been made. We wanted to see where Charlene was going to take us.
Okay.
I want to continue the conversation with future St. Stephen and Synergy, because I think those organizations, they have expertise within those organizations that can be applied to this region. So I would say that there has been no decision made at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
for this.
The strategic plan, which has to be done by the end of June, I guess, will that have to touch a little bit on the scope of that, or we?
So it doesn't, because having hired me, it's considered an in-house model.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that should be noted, because what we're coming up with planning, it's based on services being able to be provided within the RSC. Like Ignite and Vision have a completely different strategic planning model. So.
Okay, that makes sense.
But we're still working. But I think the strategic plan, we can still move forward with that. I don't see a problem there. It's how we want to approach that. But then it's how is that final committee formed and who's comprising? So that has yet to be determined.
There's a fairly well-defined scope of services that regional service, the regional delivery on 30th, that's fairly well defined. And I think we just need to keep that in mind as we move forward, especially the strategic plan. Those are the things we're mandated to deliver and, these particular things and what we're trying to avoid is duplication of service. Obviously, yeah. Exactly. There's nothing, there's a role for local economic development, which both Bishop and Stephen fills now. And, St. Andrews has a slightly different version of that, I think, like, it's on your side of your tourism.
Not as well developed as Eastern Charlotte, say.
But it might be something, I'm not sure, but I believe the synergy will be providing those types of services to Eastern Charlotte, Boston County Shores and Grand Man. I don't know whether it's with that right yet. But those are different things than the regional economic development services, which are different being from the provincial, which is non.
Yeah, there's the three levels and how do you interact within the three. That's gonna be defined, I think, because they're kind of, although they're separate, really, if the three are working together in some fashion, it's not gonna work. So we've got to define how those connections are gonna be made.
So what timelines are we on getting something down what that is? Because that's also contingent on what we do with our other ones like Synergy and Future St. Stephen. We got to know what their work is going to be. So we're just going to kind of slowly build it together, or are we going to, okay, regional service commission is doing this, and then so we're not duplicating, just like you just said. I don't want us.
Yeah, I think, well, Charlene's gonna have a little presentation here later on, we should probably actually answer Charlene's questions.
Just for the sake of this, the same could be said for tourism. You have a bunch of tourism boards in every community. It's the same concept as how do you make sure not duplication of services, and also you're not working in silos where we're working for the greater good together. So it's not alone.
We're stronger than.
Make sure we don't do that the ball.
That's right.
One might not have it at all.
Yeah, we don't want it. If we get it ready for a swing, we want somebody to take the swing. Anyway, thanks very much. Is there any other things? One of the things, I don't see a committee of the whole date. That should be in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
May 11th.
May the 11th. Yeah, 11 May. And is that gonna be at the town of St. Stephen as per normal?
Yeah, unless you wanna do something else.
No, St. Stephen's fine. I think it's central for the
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock, yeah. Okay, and then the date and time of the next regular meeting will be May 25th, 2023 at 6 p.m. Any questions, comments from the public?
Just looking for that. Nothing at this point in time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks, Paul. If there's nothing else, I will look for an adjournment. Brad, thank you. At this point, if you would like, before we go into our AGM, if you'd like to take 5 minutes for a break and whatever you need, please feel free. We'll meet back in about 5 minutes.
Sure.
That's right. I don't think it's gonna happen. That's great. I believe so. Oh, you go. I have. I'll never hear this. I've been finding it for years, like eventually it's gonna happen. 2 overtime in a row, that's just. Brothers of halves. I don't know how the years go. Anyone can mess this up.
Economic diversity.
Sorry, we can't set games.
Okay. I guess we'll call the next meeting to order, the AGM. So I guess I have to do this again, declaration of interest or conflict of interest declaration. Anybody have one to make? Thank you. You've all had a look at the agenda. Any comments or questions? If not, could I have someone move that the agenda be adopted and presented? Hey, Danny, thank you. Second. Any Harvey? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Thank you. Minutes of April 23rd, 2022 at the annual general meeting, if you've all had a chance to review those. If there's no comments or questions, I can have someone move that they be adopted and presented. Jim, thank you. Harvey, thank you. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye, thank you. Okay, we've gone through the presentation of the audit report. Do you want to carry on from there, Mark?
Thank you. Okay, so we'll flip over past the audit report and the actual audited financial statements. So you come to page 3 in the top right corner. All right, so this page here is our consolidated statement of operations for all our services. And in 2022, we did start our new services. So there are additional lines in there in the expenses and in the revenues in the schedules in the back. So when we pass our annual budget, it is a cash flow budget. So we generate enough from our rates to pay our expenses during the year. This first column is our modified budget for public sector statements. So we eliminate things like second previous year surplus deficit transfers, which are not a use of resources or generating resources. Also, capital expenditures from operations is not an expense. When we buy an asset, it's added to our balance sheet or statement of financial position. And we will amortize those capital assets over time, which will show as an expense. So when we make all those adjustments, we had actually budgeted for a deficit for public sector purposes of $899,253. The actual deficit for the year works out to be $2,952. And the biggest difference in there would be our foreign source waste, which was about $600,000 over what we budgeted. There's a few other things here and there. And the deficit, the actual deficit for the public sector accounting the year before was $128,623. So when you take our annual deficit from operations this year, 2,952, previous year carry forward all our other prior surpluses was 16,661,000. Now we have 16,658,000, so not a significant change. But in addition to this deficit from operations, the next page also gives us net remeasurement gains and losses. So this reflects our losses from the change in the market value of our portfolio investments and our foreign exchange receivables. So we do carry a lot of US dollar receivables. So the net remeasurement gain or loss for the year was $161,000. And when you take that off the beginning remeasurement gains of $284,753, at the end of this year, we have $123,623 in remeasurement gains that aren't realized at that point in time. And they all flow through into the next page, which is a consolidated statement of financial position. So our first section is our financial assets, and this comprises things like our closure fund, our reserve funds, our unrestricted assets,
and deferred revenues. We have cash, receivables, portfolio investments, $7,776,000. Our financial assets, which are things that are either cash or convertible into cash, in a short period. The liability section is things we owe to other people, including the closure and post-closure liability. And that totals altogether $2,229,000. So when you take our liabilities off our financial assets, you get a term called net financial assets. And soon this stuff's all gonna change, so. Council like to keep things the same for very long. And Dylan had mentioned too, the closure and post-closure liability will now become asset retirement obligations in 2023 statement, which is more encompassing than just closure and post-closure. And our non-financial assets down below, tangible capital assets, inventory, retained expenses. So the net of all our assets and liabilities is $16,782,000. And the breakdown is at the bottom there, what's the annual surplus and what's the unrealized remeasurement gains. Page 6, I think the only thing I'm going to point out there is the acquisition of tangible capital assets. We spent $1,171,000 on capital assets. We still have no debt related to any of our assets. And we didn't really sell much at auction this year.
If you don't mind, I'd like to go back to the previous page there, Mark. I was just going over this in my mind. Deferred grant. In 21, it was 350, and then in 22, it was 195. Was that part of that 5 million? That we,
Oh, the trails?
yeah, no, was that the
Well,
trail?
part of it's the trails money in there. It's stuff for, it's for the same coordinator salaries. That we didn't take it on for a while, so the money that we received, I just deferred it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
We purposely delayed some of that so that it would come into this year, not last year, because it would end up as a surplus if we did that.
Okay.
That's what we asked MSIC to hold on and pay us again.
Because they were giving us our quarterly payments, but we didn't have any related expense, so. No point taking it until we have the cost.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. And that's about it on that page. Statement of cash flows just says we got money from operations, we spent it on capital transactions and investing. And then page 8 is the start of the notes and statements, and all of a sudden I had an hour I could talk about all this. I could use that whole hour. I was getting sitting doing the numbers.
Maybe that could be optional at the end of the meeting.
Okay, let's just keep flipping through. We would go past 11, 12, there's a load of notes. All required for disclosure. Page 14 is the start of the details on the cash. Receivables are all kind of the same way. There's certain amount is each section is reserve funds, certain is related to closure and post-closure, deferred grants and unrestricted. And our portfolio investments in note 7. So for 2022, our book value of them was $1,609,000 at the bottom of page 14. And the fair value of them is $1,728,000. So we still have unrealized gains. And our GICs are laddered, so they come in over a period of time. Page 15, so that would be note 8. Solid waste, landfill closure and post-closure liability. And that's where there's a lot of estimates. So we still project that we're going to be in operation until 2062, which would be the end of phase 1 of the landfill. Which is a long ways in the future. And based on current data, we may last a lot longer than that. Anyway. Yeah, so the total liability at this point in time is $1,686,621. And we actually have more money in the closure funds than the liability. So we have 1,776,000 is the actual balance of all the closure assets related to them.
So what, are you saying that we don't have to pay anything into it
Not this year.
this year? How many years can we go without paying into it?
Well, as long as he's still making lots of money for us, we can go for a while.
Thank you.
There's right now, there's roughly 100,000 more in there than what the liability balance is. So all the income it earns and the capital gains as well, that stays in that fund. So we'll only transfer to that fund if we need to make up the difference.
So if that, so heaven forbid, if we take it, if the stock market goes down significantly, do we then have to fess up a bunch of money out of our operations to bring that back up to the level it's supposed to be at?
No, not by what the legislation says.
Okay.
The legislation says that the liability calculation and the funding, that we have to follow the CICA or CPA Canada standards.
Yeah.
But the standard only calculates the liability. It doesn't mention anything about funding. It's just prudent to fund it. I believe, I think the Department of Environment had guidelines out before that said you were supposed to fund it, but it didn't have to match every year.
Okay.
Just easier while you have the cash, you set it aside and say liabilities taken care of, it's funded.
Thank you.
Okay. And if we keep going along further and further here. I'd say we got maybe 5 minutes more to talk about it. On page 18, so that'd be note 12 for the surplus or deficit reconciliation. It shows all our, if you get down in the middle of the page, it's the 2022. This is the numbers we're going to use in our 2024 budget for surpluses and deficits. So wide range. Yeah. So our surplus, the biggest one out of the bunch is the solid waste surplus, 955,000. And all our new services are surpluses or small deficits. The next few pages talk about our financial instruments, so receivables and sales with foreign sources and domestic sources. How our investment funds are allocated in accordance with our policy. And then we get over to page 22. And the print's really small here because I put it on 8.5 by 14 paper going landscape. And they shrink it down to this, so it's really hard to read. But that's our note on our tangible capital assets as the cost of accumulated amortization by category, like buildings, heavy equipment, containment cells. The next page is a breakdown of our public sector surplus by individual department. And those numbers are not the second previous year surplus numbers. They're the public sector numbers, just to make it a little more confusing. The next page, page 24, let's go do. It's this is where we calculate our annual surplus deficit from public sector back to the provincial calculation. So I wouldn't waste any time there. 25 is our reserve fund.
See it anyway.
Looks good. I took my glasses off, right?
I look closer in this ball.
Okay.
You're hiding something, aren't you?
There. The reserve funds, so capital reserve funds still sits at 3.3 million, getting close to 3.4. Our operating reserve is 183,928. We've got a capital reserve for local planning, an operating reserve for local planning, and cooperative and regional operating reserve. The total reserve funds, 3,596,000. And the only money that got transferred from the operating fund was the 10,000 that came out of local planning to the capital reserve to pay for the vehicles when they're going to be replaced. And expenditures was 60,000 came out of the local planning capital reserve to buy the 2 vehicles. The notes on reserves. Next page is changing from our from our funding budgets to our public sector budget that showed up on the statement of operations. And the rest of the pages are the detailed pages on our services. So the revenues are by source, so we have member charges broken down by the various sources. And in our original budget, we had cooperative and regional planning, but part of it included the recreation, so it's been separated out. So it's under regional sport, recreation, cultural infrastructure, support and development. To match with what's going to come into our 2024 budget. Sales and services broken down by our different solid waste services. We got government transfers, which was all that money that's flown into us. Put it there. Expenditures. We have our governance expenses and administration, which are all our corporate overhead. On page 29. A lot of numbers here, I guess. We won't go into too much detail on this stuff.
I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'll take it back to page 22. That's one of those ones Alan couldn't see.
Okay.
If I'm reading this correctly, and I think this is an important point, at least I hope so, in my estimation. The balance at the bottom right-hand corner in 21 was 11,626,000, and then over on the next one to the left on 2022, it's 11,196,828. So we actually lost value basically on what we do and what we own. So the amortization or the reduction of the depreciation is greater than the value that we're putting back in.
Yeah, for that year.
Right.
But that was the year where we finish off cell construction, so it's kind of an off year too. We still spend $1 million a year, but some of this difference, it relates to when we got the gas tax funds to do the treatment lagoons.
Yeah.
So in that year, we got, let's say we got $4.5 million worth of government grants. Now, they would have gone into our income statement to show a surplus. But now those assets are being amortized every year. So maybe the amortization is $400,000 on that 3 million we spent in total. We were over budget from whatever the total gas tax grant was.
Okay.
But we got all that free money. We didn't have to borrow to do the project. So now every year, you would expect that because of all those government grants, that our amortization would be higher than what our additions are. So the total net book value will keep dropping per year unless we have a significant asset purchase in a year.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Is everything, Mark?
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of details in the revenues and expenses, so maybe if there's questions, people can just make a list of their questions and we can answer them at the next meeting.
Okay, any last minute questions on that?
In case I've never publicly stated this, I'm so thankful to have Claudette and Mark on the financial team here to take care of this stuff. It's just getting more and more complicated. So, thank you for that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we got an extra 4 pages this year.
Well, thank you very much for that report. Do we have to have a motion to accept that report?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So if I could have someone make a motion to accept the audit report as presented. Jim, thank you. Seconder, Harvey. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, thank you. Now, I apologize, we'll go back now to the presentations from the, I guess we start with Sherry, and then Charlene, and then Raymond.
Well, we are not gonna do it that way, but we're all gonna do it together.
Okay, you guys.
We're all gonna go on, we figured it'd be easier than fumbling through a presentation back and forth. But thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm gonna speak about economic development, and Sherry's gonna take over and talk about the tourism promotion, and then we're gonna finish off with community development. Says and transportation, but. Yeah, we're gonna throw it in. Yeah. So these are just all the services that we provide now. Everybody understands that now? Yeah. Are there any others? And our new mandate service. So this is economic development. So I just want to set the stage for a minute with some demographic data. So the current population for the region, 28,472. That's 2023. So that's up 2.3% from 2022 and just around a percentage point from 10 years ago, 2012. When you look at the individual municipalities within the region, some have gone up within 10 years, some have gone down. It's just evened out to pretty well even, just off a percentage point. This graph on the right is 2021 population data, and that's because it's from the census. So the reason why I took that is because I can get more details from it. Really the difference in the overall population is the difference of 600 or 700 people, so it's not significant. So I just want to point out, because this basically kind of dovetails into our workforce conversation. So 59% is this 15 to 64 age group, and that's what we consider the workforce. So that's 16,420 people. Okay. The gray at 24% is our 65 plus. That's 66,750. The small yellow is 85 plus. And the blue is 14%, that's our 0 to 14 age group. Okay, so this is what our current population breakdown looks like in the region. Of significance, there's a 20% decrease in the 0 to 14 group, the 15 to 64 group. And what I mean by that is by age group. So, for every age group, there's an average of say, 300 people. It's 20% less in the younger generations now, okay, than there is in the current workforce generation. That said, the numbers have evened out. So it doesn't look like it's dropping anymore. It has dropped and now it's kind of evened out, okay? 65 plus is still the largest portion. Even though that goes 65 to 84, it's still the largest portion. So it's still good news. We're, if the bleeding has stopped, we're in the black, we're kind of going in the right direction. So the actual labor force has grown about a 0.5 percentage point since March 2022, and the participation rate has gone up 2.5%. So participation rate is something you'll hear often in economic development and workforce development, and it is how many people are actually working or actively looking for work within your workforce, right? So the 59% again is our actual workforce that we're looking at. 60% of those people are actually working or actively looking for work. That doesn't sound very high. It's actually pretty high. It averages between 55 and 65 across the country. However, that's 15 to 64, right? So you've got all of your kids in high school in that number. You've got all your early retirees in that number. Okay, so when you just do account for those people, it's probably much higher. So I just want to let that know. 60 is still a good number for participation rate. Unemployment rate is at 66% right now. That's the lowest it's been in many years. It's an excellent number. And a year ago it was at 9%. So overall, we're in excellent shape in terms of what the workforce looks like in its current state, okay? So that said, now that I've set the stage, I'm just gonna go a bit over the mandated areas for the region. So we just had a conversation about the difference between the province, the region, and municipalities, right? So our piece is in the middle, the regional piece. There are 4 main pillars. The first is providing strategic focus. Okay, so that's what we're doing right now with our strategic planning exercises. The second is supporting investment readiness, supporting a healthy business community, and supporting workforce development and labor force growth, which includes newcomer retention. Okay, so that's for the region as a whole. Now, the difference between that and the municipality is dealing with development at the local level. So pieces of land, subdivisions, industrial parks, downtown core. That's the responsibility of the municipalities, okay? We will work with the municipalities if there's something they want to promote in terms of investment readiness, and that's where the 3 work together. The province still has the funding and access to funding, but we work closely with them on what our priorities are for funding, okay? So for investment readiness, what that means for the region is that we partner with, again, like I just said, with the province and municipalities to promote the region as investment ready. So it's data-driven growth priorities. And I mean that by what does it look like for the labor force? What are your needs? What are the wages it's going to pay? How much tax base you're going to get after the fact? Like there's so much that has to go into that to really promote something, because right now, and I'll get into this, our workforce is what we have, right? We don't have a lot of excess people sitting around, right? So if we're going to promote something, then we really have to do our due diligence. Creating for regional asset profiles. So this is where, for us, we have a very great position, right? We have rail, port, land, the border, we have great highways, we have provincial parks, we have tourism assets. We have all kinds of things to promote. It's just a matter of what do we want to focus on, and what does it look like. Now, it doesn't mean to say that you can only promote one thing at a time. It doesn't say that at all. It's just, let's come together as a region and decide the top, 3 or 4 things we want to do at once. So with that information, we'll develop regional value propositions. So part of those value propositions is, it's the workforce profile, it's the housing profile, it's what we have for services in the communities, right? If people want to come in and invest, it's putting that whole package together for investors to say, this is what it looks like if you come and do business here, or if you come and open up here. And then our last piece of this mandate is promoting the region, and this is where we plan to work closely with tourism promotion and Sherry's group, because that's their biggest piece of their mandate is the promotion piece. So we'll probably piggyback off of that and make sure that we can use the same type of branding. So here's some opportunities and factors that have come to light. So I've done a lot of stakeholder engagement already. I've met with a lot of municipalities and chambers, business partners, the funding partners, business leaders, and some of the things that have come out are these. So the Atlantic Gateway Trade Corridor used to be called, some people may know that. That is essentially what I just said. That's building off our existing transportation assets. We have a strong tourism industry, right? Let's build off of it. So what I mentioned, labor force impact on the growth priorities. You can't just say this business wants to come to town and you say, yep, okay, go ahead, because what's the impact of that right now? This isn't 15 years ago where we had a lot of people on unemployment and a lot of people out of work, and the economy wasn't doing all that well. We have the opposite problem right now. We don't have enough workers, right? So if we're going to bring business in, we want to be strategic about it. And the next bullet goes directly with that: industry jobs that pay equal to or more than the cost of living. So if you're going to bring those jobs in and you have to find the workers, do we really want those to be jobs that pay $15 an hour? Or would you rather have them contribute to the economy even more and paying them a nice living wage? Housing and lodging, that is the #1 barrier right now for every employer I've spoken with, right? Every employer across the region, the #1 barrier is housing. Even if they can get the workers, there's nowhere for them to live. So it's a really big barrier. So again, it's great to bring people in, But we really gotta think about some of the stuff first before we start, calling people and telling them to come do business. I also want to mention startup branding. I'm not sure if you've heard of Startup Canada. We have partnered with the CBDC in St. Stephen, Charlotte Kings to use Startup Canada branding. So we can use that for entrepreneurial training and events. So those are just a few things that we're working on. So workforce development and labor force growth, this is a big piece of the mandate. Again, because of the fact that we don't have enough workers, right? This is a provincial issue. I think it's across the board issue, likely across Canada. This is where, at the bottom, the funding from Kettle or Working ME, this is where this money goes to. Okay, so our share is 227,776 for the year. The biggest piece of the mandate is developing a regional labor market partnership forum, or LMP. So that has been established with our funding partners. So OMB, Working MB at COA, RDC, CBDC. And what we're doing is we're actually meeting every couple of months to go over the files and the applications that are coming forward to make sure that they're strategic and that we're all on board with them and that they're not duplicating, right? It's all about not duplicating efforts, right? That's one piece of it. Also through the forum, the biggest piece for this year is developing another strategy. It's a regional workforce development and labor force growth strategy. And this is going to be where the KPIs come in. So the province wants us to, these KPIs are what they kind of threw out there. We're in conversations with them now about what they actually look like, but things that are related to population growth, related to labor force growth, employment growth, retention rate for newcomers, right? So that's a big one. The retention rate for newcomers is a really big one. And that will be a big part of the work in this bucket. So mapping out newcomer retention services in the region, that's a separate bullet on its own in that mandate. So some of the initiatives, so the LMP's been established. We're sending out a survey this summer after the first strategy is done to all the businesses in the region, to ask them what their current reality is in terms of labor force, in terms of, what are they experiencing? What are they paying? Just so we have a good idea of where the gaps are. We currently have a contract with Practical HR Solutions. This was something that Future St. Stephen had. It was being paid through Working MB and funneled through Future St. Stephen, and we've taken that over because it's regional in nature. Sherry DeVoe, you may know her, she's an HR professional in the region. And she is working with us in this contract that covers these areas. So if any small or medium-sized business has any recruitment issues, they just can't find workers, they can give us a call, we can put them in touch with Sherry, and Sherry will help them. Sherry and her staff will help them. They'll walk them through the immigration process if they have to. And whatever they can, they'll do the postings for them, rewrite the ads for them, whatever they need, she'll help them with that. There's 2 annual job fairs in that contract. The first one was just held in St. Stephen in March. There's HR support to businesses, so for best practices. So if a lot of our businesses, especially small and medium-sized companies, they don't have an actual human resource department, right? So they only know what they know, and a lot of them don't know best practices. So if they just don't know how to handle the situation, they can just give Sherry a call. Okay, so that's all billed under this one contract. And then there's a regional HR committee, and they meet bi-monthly, and Sherry runs that. So that's, I don't know the number, I think there's 20 or 25 companies within the region that sit on that committee, and she provides them with training, sharing best practices. It's a forum for all the companies in the region to attend. And then lastly, we'll be working with community development on the newcomer services mapping. As part of Ray's mandate is the settlement services in the region. And so we'll work together to make sure we've got that covered off. So the last piece is supporting a healthy business community. Now within the mandate, this, so we have a map of these existing support services, determine the role. We're not allowed to provide financial support because that's the province, but beyond that, the gates are kind of wide open in this area. I kind of have this supporting our current regional economy. Like this is our economy right now. This is our economy, right? So sometimes we think these big numbers, like there's this, $100 million company coming to town, and we think that is all economic development is. But our economic development is currently what we have, right? So a lot of times we have companies turning over, right? I think Al, you mentioned that the other night, and that happens not just in St. Stephen, but everywhere. But if they had supports in place, would that happen? We're not sure, right? So I think we can do better there. I think the sky's the limit. What we can do with helping our current business community, especially small business owners and entrepreneurs. But this is, I think, really an exciting area. So these are some of the things that have come up: business resiliency and entrepreneurial support, human resource practices training, business succession planning, lobbying, business networking events. There's all kinds of different things we can do there to help the local community, help the local businesses. And finally, our strategic planning. So these are our committee members. Harvey is our chair, and the rep from Campobello. And we have representation from every municipality within the region. They're all listed there. We had our first meeting last week, the kickoff. We have an in-person workshop with the committee and a few stakeholders, May 23rd. Then we'll work together with the committee to, back and forth to get the input. And again, we're coordinating with tourism and community development. That'll be ongoing. And board approval for the 5-year work plan by July 1st. So having said that, when I came up with the model before, as I said, this is based on the parameters that we were given for an internal model. So on the work plan at the end of that, it will have, these are the actions that we think we want to do. This is what that's going to take, the effort it's going to take, and how much it's going to cost, right? So that can translate into resources. It can translate into, that's probably 2 full-time people or 2 full-time people plus outsourcing a few things, or right. So that's what we'll try to do as a model for the strategic plan.
Fine. Thank you. So everybody, I feel like I had an opportunity to meet you in person. My name is Sherry, and I'm the director of tourism marketing services for the commission, in addition to our recreation services are in place. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on the tourism services because that's brand new for us, and we've already done a lot of good work on the recreation space, and so we can lightly touch on that. But today I want to walk you through what this looks like, and I feel like some of this may be reiteration because I've been a circuit on talking about all the various councils, industry associations, all of our stakeholders at various levels, including funding partners, to inform them about these new changes that came into effect in January. But in a session, Charlene touched a bit on it, but we are going to be doing tourism promotion, marketing, essentially. And where there's an opportunity and there's a synergy for tourism development opportunities, or some form or fashion for development for tourism in her wheelhouse. So today I'm going to focus on what that looks like. The province mandated essentially these items here being first and foremost. We have the opportunity to develop our regional tourism strategy. There currently wasn't anything in place for our region for the past 3 years. And it wasn't necessarily reflective and collaborative of all of the partners and members of them today and our region. So in addition to the tourism strategy, we also have an opportunity, and we are required to make a marketing strategy, put a plan in place. We have to create an online website, and then all of the programs. And as Mayor Anderson alluded to before, who happens to be the chair of the tourism committee, we're looking at ways to effectively not duplicating services or support a lot of the tourism associations in the region already. And so this is my roadmap that I've been following and trying to walk everybody through, but it's been broken down into 5 steps. So the first step is work that I started out in January, and it was taking stock of the landscape of what that looked like. It's ongoing. Every time I meet with somebody, there's a new operator or a stakeholder that I should be connecting with. So that's ongoing. But step 2 was assessing our position. We did not have a very good baseline or understanding of who was coming to our region. We anecdotally thought we knew who it was, and we, for the most part, had a feeling of what part of the country they were coming to, but we really didn't have any strong numbers, and we didn't have a sense of what those people liked to do, what was their age group, where did they live, for us to inform our marketing strategy. So, in January, and it just closed, it's still a little bit ongoing now, we partnered with Embryonic Analytics, they're a data analytics company, to undertake a very detailed analysis of the visitors coming to our region. And from there, the goal was to set our tourism committee members up with enough information to start stepping into some workshops and working through our opportunities, strengths, weaknesses, and then helping us shape up our opportunities for the tourism strategy, which is where we're at currently right now. So point 3, we have a very intense few weeks, I guess about 10 is I believe what we have, if anybody's counting, to have our committees work through the first phase of our tourism strategy, which needs to be delivered to the board on June 29th. If it's accepted and the board feels good in the direction that we're putting forward, we would then move into a second strategy development, very much like what Caroline's doing, where she has the first strategy and then the second. We will then move into a marketing and branding strategy with the data insights and the top priorities that the committee feels we should be focusing on for the region for tourism promotion. Once we have that in the works, it's an ambitious goal, but what I would like to do is that we have our marketing and brand developed by the end of October, so that I can roll into getting it into motion, getting the website up, working with our various partners to create potentially some enticing packages to promote and attract people to our region, so that we can launch officially as the regional destination marketing office for Southwest New Brunswick, January 2024. So those are our goals. So that's the roadmap that I'm working with right now. And now I wanted to take a chance to just maybe give you a little bit of information on some of the initial findings, very high level, some of those insights that I have been finding about who's come to our region. What does that market look like? This map doesn't look like what you're probably used to looking at. This map is reflective of some of the new local government boundaries, but it's also a map that defines geo fences that have areas of high tourism potential. So in some instances, for example, St. Stephen's, St. Andrews, and Funny Shores, the resident geographical location worked out quite well, but then there were some instances where, for example, McAdam, we actually joined that parts of the rural community together because that defined part of the St. Croix watershed and a potential opportunity there. And again, it's just to test these out and for us to kind of get some insight of who's moving into what parts of our region. Next, we have the islands, and I will work to have those split up eventually, but for this general baseline to start, we wanted to have a good understanding of just how much movement is happening there, and then we can slice and dice afterwards. For baseline, we have that. Eastern Charlotte is a huge territory and it's diverse. So I've actually broken that up into essentially South Shore, Eastern Charlotte, and then what I'm calling Orange Country, so they can talk all the various sites that are out there. I'll work the messaging on that, but loosely in my head, that's how I see it geographically, right? From a consumer perspective, or visitors are consumer, trying to see where their heads might be at things when they want. So this is the map that I'm working with. And here's what we found, and we're just gonna go up 2022 numbers. We had a total of just over 300,000 visitors to the Southwest region. And we made up 11% of that 2.7 million visitors to the province, so 11% market share. And one thing I wanted to touch on was that the province, the Department of Tourism, Heritage and Culture, they have a data insights company as well, and many of you know that they have divided the province up into quite large regions where we have the River Valley, then there's the Fundy region, there's the Miramichi region, very big territory. So our Southwest region falls within the Fundy territory. And it was just interesting to note that we made up just under 32% of the funding market share of visitors coming to our region. We had people visit us from all over Canada, but our top markets were New Brunswick, so lots of interprovincial travel, and it does make sense considering that kind of recovering from post-COVID, and that we were really promoting that road trip and to stay close to home. A lot of the borders weren't open yet, or people weren't comfortable, so I think that makes sense. Next, we have Ontario making 19% of our market share, Nova Scotia 14%, Quebec actually is a fairly large market in here at 10%. Our US visitors came in at 6% of our total visitors. We will focus more information on there. Then we had PEI, Alberta actually flagged a little bit on there, and then there's the rest of Canada. So it's just interesting to note that we did have people as far away from the Northwest Territories, BC visit our region. They just weren't quite enough of a population size for us to actually flag them as a target market, or what we're calling the benchmark market. So when we talk about our Canadian target groups, again, we're going to hone in and focus in on Ontario, New Brunswick, PEI, Nova Scotia, and Quebec. And so who from those provinces are coming here, and what do they look like? Because this is the information we're going to be able to answer some important questions. Seniors with middle income make up 30% and or it's a significant amount of the share of our visitors. Younger urbanites, those are the people that have modest to middle incomes. They may have some young families at home, but they're the ones that are looking to really get outdoors and do the hiking, backpacking, outdoor adventure. And we have our upscale suburban families. Again, those are predominantly from Ontario and Nova Scotia, but they tend to really enjoy visiting the Fundy Shores, St. Andrews, and their islands. Then we have our Ontario hiking families got their own bracket and their own subgroup, and I think that's not surprising there. And then we had diverse singles and couples, middle-aged families from Quebec. Really like the book of that area. I'm going to dig into that one some more because that one was interesting. They also really enjoyed New River Beach Monday. So for our USA target markets, again, no big surprise here for those of you who keep a pulse on the tourism industry and what's happening on our provincial level, but New England, Maine, Florida, and Mid-Atlantic make up the portion of our US travelers. Here, Maine seniors, younger to middle-aged families, and mature spring visitors, those are population from Maine, 57% of our visitors for US. Again, likely not too different. Then we had affluent empty nesters who showed up from Florida, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Vermont, and Rhode Island, made up 16% of those visitors. Then we had middle-aged upscale families, or families with middle modest income. So meaning under $100,000. So that's, depending on the US, I don't know if it's modest, but it's still under $100,000. And these are traveling everywhere except so that taking out the Florida and the Maine. So that's what that 10% is there. Then we had upscale families and summer visitors specifically from Florida, who really enjoy coming up here and made up 30% of regular. So it's just some interesting insights that I just wanted to share with you guys on that report that Mark had mentioned earlier on some insights, because this is going to essentially structure up and help us form and answer these questions. Who are they? What do they like to do? Recreation do they like to do? Sports, do they like to just wine and dine? So that we can understand, are we offering what our visitors want? And then when we look at the market share of those people who are coming here, it's quite large. There's 25 million market share available to us in those target groups. So that's the market opportunities. So if we can work with our municipal tourism associations and partners, we can pull together some really creative insights to say, this type of marketing program or this type of offering at your operation, hotel, whatever it may be, might help have people come and have a really fantastic time and want to return and come and stay longer. We also want to know, how do they think, so that we can understand how we can attract them. What type of media do they like to consume? How can I reach them? Because the senior from Maine and Florida may consume and or plan their vacations differently than the younger urbanites, the upscale families, right? So just understanding our different levers that we can pull to reach this target market. And so with that, the key thing to keep in mind is that whatever we do as a region must align with the provincial strategy that's in play, the invitation, which is essentially inviting people to come to New Brunswick as if you were handing them a birthday invitation, and you're giving them the who, when, where, this is how you're gonna dress, and this is dress for the weather and bring bug spray, but you know what I'm saying. And they also want it to really just shine and be warm and inviting, but also interest and activity-based focus on marketing. So no more just still landscapes of our beautiful bays, and trying to just bring to life what our region has to offer, to get people excited to picture themselves doing the things that we have here to do. So that is my bit on tourism. Anybody has any questions? Excellent, good. Okay, so recreation. You guys as members led the way when it came to the new mandated services that passed down in local government reform. With the model that we guys had put in place for the recreation asset plan policy. So the cost sharing on infrastructure, all of the analysis work that we needed to do on a sub-regional basis. I'm not going to say the different zones, depending on who's in the room, you might hear me say zone, but essentially all of that work we're analyzing, what do we have to use, what can we work with, and how can we make it stronger and better for our community members. So that's now mandated by the province, so we already did that, so it's great, right, recreation committee. But we do have a couple really interesting and I think exciting opportunities to look and work through the next few months. Just like all of the other services, we have to have a strategic plan completed by June 29th. But we do have to consider and look at perilous, if any regional recreation infrastructure that members could potentially cross share on. Regional. We have to consider this. The next thing would be, this is something that ties into the Ray's wheelhouse, but it's something that we've actually had a little bit of opportunity to advance, is we work with partners to provide inclusive opportunities for sport, rec, and leisure activities to residents living in vulnerable conditions, low income, in Southwest New Brunswick. So last year, Ray and I before we knew about everything that was really happening, had already connected, and we were asked, Ray was asking what options do we have to help our low income families or those communities, maybe they're a little more isolated, or it's harder to get programs over there. What do you guys have? And I said, well, I don't know how to do it. So then I reached out to my counterparts at the province. And they're like, well, there isn't really anything technically in place right now for Europe, but there's networks like this, and Moncton, the bigger centers. I was like, well, how do we get something like that here? We didn't hear anything for a while, and then all of a sudden they called back and said, we'd like to pilot a project for RSC 10 and RSC 2 with UNB and ESIC, so economic social inclusion, with a pilot project, and it's independent of the RSC. But they essentially really did phase 1 of a 3-phase study where they were really trying to understand how can you remove those barriers. So they have already been in the communities meeting, I think, with over, they've held 4 workshops, over 57 different stakeholders, and it includes the people in the communities. These the people who would be the ones potentially accessing these new services to identify the issues and then come up with some solutions. So all of that work just wrapped up. And now we have an opportunity to look at what that could look like for phase 2. So it falls down underneath my bucket of good things that we get to deliver. But I'm really excited to work with the Recreation Committee on having us explore some opportunities with this partner, with the University of New Brunswick and ESIC, on just finding out what that looks like. That's a really exciting opportunity. And that is all I have on recreation. No other questions? That's about great. Yeah.
Do we know how many service commissions kept recreation and tourism together, or how many kind of divided it up? Because I know originally that was the plan, and then I believe it was the RC board that decided to split that up. Is that correct? So,
Sorry, I didn't catch all of it.
yeah, so I was just wondering, in different service commissions, originally was tourism and recreation was together, and then we discussed splitting it up. I believe it was a board decision. Is that what we're seeing in other service commissions, or are they still keeping it as one combined effort?
It depends. Some of them that had already started, let's say tourism services and or recreation services, are doing a little of both. So we're still splitting up the tourism and the recreation. We just had one because we had less work.
Oh, for sure.
Initially in the recreation.
But are other RCs splitting it up, or are they keeping it together?
It's every region seems to be taking this differently. For instance, we don't have a single regional facility that we identified to cost share 100%. Because it didn't make sense in our region. There's a few other regions that are very much the same. They'll have a couple of different ones. They're sub-regional, I think, Restitutions like that, so they had a couple of different, they're very close to us. Kent has done something a little bit different, where they have like a large center, but what they've done is they've added a distance calculation into their cost share. So because the center they have is at one end of the region, the ones that are the furthest away have a factor, there's a factor applied to distance, because less than the region distance. So everybody's kind of done this different approach. In terms of splitting up what you're saying, the recreation and tourism, some of them, the tourism part is actually split out, and some of them, the recreation itself, they'll have a recreation coordinator, but then we also have a couple of other people in the recreation space itself, because they're taking a different approach. So some of them have done 100% cost share. So we did the approach of, we're going to put some money in a bucket, and we're going to take some of the money out of that bucket and divvy it up accordingly. That is what we did. But others have taken the entire cost of the operation of, say, an arena and split that out. So And because they do that, then they also get more involved with the actual operations. So. In St. John, Fredericton, and Moncton are completely different, so, answering your question is
It's all over the place.
all of it.
Okay, sure. All right, let's talk community development. We'll try to make it quick, and I've done a presentation that's very high level. We can get into it. I'm happy to come and talk to your individual councils, if you want. And I know many of you, but not all of you yet, so I'm looking forward to working with you all. The other thing I'll note before I get into it is just as Sherry was saying, there's that recreation piece, that inclusive recreation. There's going to be a bunch of areas where our priorities overlap with economic development, community development, and recreation. And so it's really great for us to be in-house together. We'll be able to collaborate on certain items between the three of us, and hopefully with your communities as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is just do like a 1 minute high level crash course on community development, because I think it's something that makes you scratch your head. What do you mean by community development? Chances are, though, you are all involved in it already. So first, community development is a comprehensive approach. So multi-levels and a way to support healthier, more vibrant, sustainable communities. As an approach, it's centered on certain principles. Principles like empowerment for your community, equity for individuals, human rights, inclusion, social justice, self-determination, collective action. And in practice, what it does is it centers your community as the experts on their lives and what should be happening in their communities. It focuses on redistribution of power to address causes of inequality and disadvantage. You might have certain citizens in your communities that aren't able to make it to the grocery store, or they don't have a vehicle, they can't participate fully in their community. So community development is an approach that helps to redistribute the accessibility and the possibility for members in your community. And then finally, it's led by community. This is an important part. It's led by community and supported by governments and organizations at every stage. So the key thing there is, how are we empowering our community members to make their communities vibrant, and how are we supporting that work? So you might be able to start to think, okay, yes, I know a bunch of different people or volunteers or champions in your own communities that kind of fit in that community development work. And likely a lot of them are actually in nonprofit organizations or in your schools, or so community development is at the core of a lot of most nonprofit organizations. But community development works best when everybody's working together, like across the sectors. So it's not just the nonprofit struggling away on its own, trying to figure out how to address a real challenge in your community. It's having, a government partner right there walking beside them, and some citizens and also volunteers and even your businesses, everybody on board. So that's community development in a nutshell. So what does that look like for the Regional Service Commission? So part of the mandate being settled in the Service Commission, it's intended to solidify the various levels of support that we have in our region for our communities, and to provide structures that can align those different efforts, provincial, regional, local. There's a number of provincial frameworks and plans that already exist that are going to be helping direct and feed into this, and we'll get to some of those and how they're already working. So we've got the ESIC, Economic Social Inclusion Plan, with Overcoming Poverty Together. You have our regional resiliency work through justice and public safety. We've got our community health needs assessment that Horizon Health does on a cycle for our region.
We've got New Brunswick Recreation Sport Policy Turner. All of these are feeding into the community development work in our communities. So how do you make sure those are all coordinated? Because these are all really important efforts. And you've got a lot of different, committees or resources that are committing their time to these different plans or frameworks. How do we make sure that we're leveraging all those at the same time to really make a difference in our communities? And that's kind of the point of settling community development into cities, is to do that. So as part of our process, and I also want to stress, we have this strategy deadline for end of June, but this is an ongoing thing. Like, we're going to be working on this for a long time. So throughout the short term, but also the long term, some of our work will be gathering key partners, stakeholders. Same thing as what we're doing with economic development, tourism, examining the landscape, identifying goals, plans, actions, and then putting together a coherent regional community development plan. And I don't think there's going to be too many surprises in what some of our major issues are in our communities. We know housing is an issue. We know, poverty is an issue, but it manifests itself on so many different levels. We know access to different kinds of services is an issue. So I'm sure a lot of those things that we already know are going to come up to the forefront. But again, the point is, on a regional scale, and with all those different other frameworks and plans coming together, we'll just do better together. We'll have a stronger cooperative approach. So, because there's a lot of different investments coming in from government or being made in effort, in energy from our local community members. So how does that all kind of merge together to make sure that all that infrastructure, all that investment is being utilized really effectively? Just a few milestones, because this is an AGM for 2022, some milestones. The RSC has that partnership established with the Economic Social Inclusion Corporation, Vibrant Communities, which have been working with the Economic and Social Inclusion Corporation for the last 10 years in our region. It's been integrated into the Service Commission now and all of that knowledge. And then we've got a really good collaboration with regional resiliency team members from JPS, as well as our Horizon community developers who are working on that the community health needs assessment process. And that's going to have its own engagement over the coming months with community members, and we'll be informing a lot of what are some of the challenges and the factors, what we call social determinants of health, that feed into what the challenges your communities are facing.
I think I sent out a note today about that. That started as a Western Charlotte thing, but now it's the whole region. And that was the recent change, like yesterday kind of thing. So anyway, it should be in the email.
Yeah, I can speak to that in a minute. I think it's coming up. I just can't not give a plug for Vibrant Communities, because I just want you to know that the community development work here, it's already hit the ground running because we've integrated Vibrant Communities. So over the last 10 years, Vibrant has coordinated over almost $1 million of basic investment into communities, into a variety of community level projects. So supported over 64 projects across the county. It has an established network of over 200 people already, community members, contacts, and that's growing. Our service commission has grown, so those contacts need to grow along with it. And it's established collaboration across the county with schools, nonprofits, and it's partnered actually with the RSC in the past few years already. So we've got a good working relationship. And so I think I just want the board to know that we've already got a good thing going and established. Coming on board with the Community Inclusion Network, and now that it's settled here, because of the work that Vibrant's done, And now that that work is centered at the Service Commission, I think it actually expands the capacity of what Vibrant was able to do. So hopefully it's just gonna get better. Finally, just the high level of what our strategy is supposed to be. Obviously, strategic focus. It's going to be looking at supporting the community inclusion network actions. So how do we keep building on the work that Vibrant's already doing? That alignment with the provincial poverty reduction action frameworks. And then how do we support additional goals from the community capacity resiliency framework as well? So that's it in a nutshell. Like there's so many more details we could get into, but we're not going to. So we'll leave it at that, but happy anytime you guys want to give me a call, give me a shout. Happy to come talk to your community, talk to your council, establish partnerships. My work, I was just telling Ken this, so much of my work is about building connection and building collaboration, because we have to get there together. We can't do it on our own. So happy to spend time talking to a volunteer, to a school teacher, to a council member, anybody, if it's going to build connection and collaboration for community development. I think that's it.
Does the board have any questions? Comments?
Good question. So I know you're collaborating with Verizon Health, but how far into health services do you anticipate the committee or the work that you're doing, like, from a regional lens, talking about addiction services or mental health, or like that on its own would be a full-time job for a number of employees, but I'm wondering how far down that path in that particular field are you looking to go?
And I think, at Verizon Health, there's certain services that it's providing, right? And so when it does its health needs assessment, it's trying to understand how does it provide its best service possible with what it offers, and how does it need to change what it can do. But where our work with community development comes in is, let's bring up the mental health and addictions piece, because that's one of the priority actions that we actually, as a community inclusion network, we actually have funding from ESIC to kind of funnel towards that. And when we first had that priority action to support mental health and addiction services, reduce wait times, I was like, how am I responsible for that as vibrant communities or as a service commission? So I think it does take some thinking. Where I went to is, how do we support our community organizations that cross those thresholds every day into addictions and mental health, so that they're also making inroads with the folks who need help and support with that, and that it works in tandem with whatever services Verizon or your public health sector is providing. So for example, we are supporting Sophia Recovery Center. And that's kind of like it's a sideways, it's not a direct like service that public health offers. But what they do is they have an amazing nonprofit community service that is still supporting that same addictions and mental health need that exists in the community. And so there are sideways or community avenues that you can work to support those initiatives. So I think that's how we have to look at some of these things, is where does it land in the community? Not necessarily like, we're not going to be the government sector, but how do we again support the community and some of the efforts on a nonprofit level to support that work in another way that actually makes the whole supporting system a bit more holistic. And
it does. Giving reference to the recovery center, it's a good example of how you can work with an organization.
Yeah, and there's so many more, because I mean, providing transportation can have a huge mental health or health benefit. The work that Down Rise is doing, getting somebody to their medical appointment could save their life, by identifying a disease or, you know, providing a certain kind of treatment, but it also can be, it can break isolation for somebody who's been living at home alone and they don't have anybody to take them to a social engagement, like, so, and that's mental health as well. So like, there's so many ways that these things
Different lenses,
can cross over, with community development. So it's big. That's why I wanted to keep it pretty high level for you guys, but yeah, good question. Thanks.
Well, Carlene, Terry, and Ray, thank you very much for your briefings tonight, very informative. And we look forward to working with you and hearing from you in the future. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the chairperson's report. And I understand there's a,
It's really just the first couple of pages of the annual report.
Yeah.
You can.
and if you've read it in trying to save a little time, if you've had a look through it, okay, if you haven't, please do. Basically, it just reiterates, we've had a very interesting couple of years. We've accomplished a lot in tough times, a lot of new things coming on. It's hard to remember how much stuff we actually do over the last year, so it does encapsulate that. I don't know if that's trying to get away for a hockey game of Maple Leafs.
Me?
Yeah.
No, this is my anniversary.
Oh, my. All right, let's go. I didn't know that. No, man. I'm here to look at grants. Okay, well, let me speed things right along.
It's been 21 years, there's no hurry to get home.
You know you're live. Everybody.
One of the last things we want to look at is the selection of auditors. Is there any, Hollis, I should let you run with this one, I think.
I need a motion from, it's just a kind of a technical requirement. We need a motion from the board to appoint auditors. The only ones we have, any kind of pricing from is our current auditor, Steve Saunders. So my staff recommendation is to appoint Steve Saunders for our next audit.
Did I have someone move that Pete Saunders be accepted? Unless there's any other discussion that wants to be taken place on it. Okay, seconded. Thanks, Harvey. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, thank you. Now, the statements of disclosure, every year we have to sign that documentation. Do you send that out to us digitally?
It's only if something's changed.
Okay, so I don't think well, sorry, I can't speak for the rest of it. But if something has changed with your business or anything that may impact the RSC, that disclosure needs to be made. So if you have something like that, Claudette, you're gonna look after that?
Yep, I'll look after sending it. Send it to Holly, I think it's gonna be a quick email, and just like I said, unless something has changed, you don't have to return it.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. Any questions on that? Okay. Any Q&A, questions and answers from the public?
Nothing, Mr. Chair.
I thought there might have been something for. Okay.
Happy anniversary.
Can I have- Before we close, yes, happy anniversary. But on behalf of the board, I'd really like to thank all the staff that have worked with us all year. We're not an easy bunch most times, but we do appreciate all the work and the loyalty that you guys put into all this, and so thank you. We do appreciate it. So if I can have a move to adjourn. So Al, thank you, meeting adjourned. You guys all drive carefully going home. Don't watch the game. Don't watch the game.